Farmers, trust is everything. At Genesis Fertilizers, we're not just proposing to build a facility, we're building a future designed for you. With real progress already underway, we're closer to providing Western Canadian farmers with a reliable, locally produced fertilizer supply. Now is the time to take control of your farm's future. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 of Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And as always, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast as well. Well, today we've got a great lineup for you, a great show. There's a lot of issues. And you know what? In weeks where the team is out on the road, it's hard to squeeze it all into one show, right? Into an hour. We had Lyndsey at Grow Canada. I was at an event with Agrimart earlier in the week. We've got other team members that have been out and about. Lots happening here. This is one of the busiest weeks of the year, so we got lots to chat about when Lyndsey Smith and Kelvin Heppner join me for the RealAg Issues Panel. We'll also be joined today by Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. We got lots to talk about in the cattle markets. We got a price update, what's going on in that Choice Select spread. We're also going to talk a little bit about talk of plant closures, slowdown, some cutbacks and some shifts. So what is driving that? We had a Tyson announcement earlier this week. JBS out of Brazil is talking about 11 plants maybe facing some not total shutdown, but definitely reducing the amount of productivity. And we'll talk to Ann about what is kind of driving that. What does it mean for cattle producers? Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. You're also more than welcome to call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. And make sure you take the time over the weekend to check out RealAgriculture.com and all of the great content that our team is gathering at events from across Canada and the United States and trying to bring all of that back to you, and also trying to provide our perspective and our thoughts and really try to make sure that you have the latest and the greatest in terms of what's being said and what's happening. And all that translates back to, I should say, helping you make more money in your farm business. So please check out RealAgriculture.com. And if you don't subscribe to our e-newsletters, you can do that by going to RealAgriculture.com/subscribe. Let's take a break. When we come back, we've got Ann Wasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange right after this.
At Vaderstad, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Vaderstad, we look forward to growing together.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147 Sirius XM. Hey, maximize your productivity and profitability with an innovative all-in-one approach to farming, combining accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology. MNP Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. You can visit mmp.ca. Let's talk beef markets for the beef market update with Ann Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. And how are we doing?
I am great today, Shaun.
Yeah, you're enjoying early December here?
Yes, it's fine. I know, it's just flying.
Yeah. Okay, lots of time to get to Christmas shopping in. I'll start maybe about the 21st-ish. Okay. Are you an early Christmas shopper?
Yeah, for the most part. But there's the odd one that stumps me, but for the most part, I'm early. Yeah.
I knew you were a proactive person. Well, we got to be proactive about these markets too. Prices have been strong through the fall. There is risk to manage as well. Something you're pretty passionate about. What's the cash update here right now? What's going on in the U.S. and in Canada?
Yeah, let's start in the U.S., Shaun. Kind of a quiet week coming out of the holiday last week for the U.S., so there hasn't been a pile of cattle trade. I did see some cattle in Kansas passing at 190 yesterday, which is steady. So let's assume we're going to be on top of that, but we don't know. There was a little bit of trade in North Nebraska kind of areas, 190, which is anywhere from steady to 2 lower, and some dress trade in the North at 297. That's up 2. So again, I think when all is done, we're going to see things settle out steady or better, but still kind of waiting on it. We did see that choice cutout close about $4.50 lower than last week, so 307.85 on the choice. Things are going to just kind of slow down now as we head into the holidays. A lot of the buying's been done for the season, so this is pretty typical. But I think looking back, as we can now that we're into the 12th month of the year, beef demand overall for 2024 has just been, really has had a great run, to put it in a nutshell. Just to finish up on prices in Alberta, we did see some improvement in our cash market, 415 dressed. That's 4 to 7 better than last week. The news, I just wanted to remind folks on carcass weights in Canada, we did kind of see them back off. They made their highs there in October, early November. They backed off last week to 977 for a steer weight. 2020, which still sounds big. 2024 is going to finish at about, it looks like 946, 25 pounds heavier than last year. So an annual average historically is about 7 or 8 pounds per year. And this year we're adding 25 to it. So a big jump in weight, same kind of storyline in the US. And again, the economic driver there was fairly reasonable cost of gain, record high fed cattle prices, 1 + 1 = 2. Let's make the cattle bigger.
Yeah, and one of the things we've been talking a lot about, Wednesday we were talking to Jody Lawrence about the corn market, and even going back the past couple of weeks, sideways trade, which is really kind of allowed. Not only we have lower cost of gain for cattle feeders, but we've also got maybe some stability in that corn price, which I probably eases their stomach a little bit.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, now as we start going forward in 2025, we'll be talking about, what kind of opportunities there are, but most of it's going to center around weather, right? I mean, acres and trendline yield and all that kind of stuff. So that'll be the thing that we watch, not just from the grain side, but from the cattle side as well. Yeah.
Speaking of sideways trade, I just pulled up December live cattle. And basically for the past year, and we have floated about in the $15 range, 175 to 190.
Yeah, it's funny how markets, even going back almost a year now, Shaun, kind of they made that big move higher, especially on the deferred futures, and the markets have kind of caught up to that, and the market leads, for sure in terms of those futures markets and kind of sets those ranges, if you will. But for the most part, I think our ranges are set for the next little while.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
StatsCan did an update when it comes to live cattle exports.
Yeah, we had a couple things out of StatsCan this week. This is for October. And we have been moving a fair number of fed cattle south this year. Go back to the summer when we had the strike in Ontario at the Guelph plant. So we saw lots of fed cattle exports and cow exports back then. But it's continued pretty steady with lots of fed cattle out of the west moving south as well. So in October, our fed cattle exports were up 58%. Year to date, we're up 31%. So we're going to end around, well, right now we're at about 380,000 head have gone south with 2 more months to go. Cow exports were down though. So fed cattle exports up, cow exports down. Year to date, we're down 2%. Feeder cattle exports been super quiet in 2024. They were down in October 32%, and year to date we're down 16%. So the flow has certainly been more on the slaughter cattle. And as you are well aware, feeder cattle supplies in Western Canada, or in Canada for that matter, are tight. And so we're not going to be sending feeder cattle south. On the opposite, we're bringing feeder cattle in.
Yeah. And just market dynamics driving those, in that pretty substantial increase in live cattle going south.
Yeah, and I think, a couple of things, our plants aren't running Saturdays. So, we're running at a smaller kill overall in both the US and Canada in terms of not running Saturdays. And so efficiency in terms of where cattle need to go to make the most sense and who needs the cattle from a supply perspective. Just a reminder that Pacific Northwest region is part of our region when we talk about slaughter cattle. And,
I've said it lots, but, those north, P&W plants or area plants need Canadian cattle. The part of their business plan is Canadian cattle.
Yeah, and especially U.S. supplies are going to tighten some more in 2025. I mean, this storyline we're talking about right now, we will be talking about a year from now.
Yeah, and it was Tyson plant closures this week. Also saw Bloomberg had a report that JBS is considering shutting down or scaling back production in 11 of its Brazilian plants. What's driving this right now? Because what I'm reading a lot is it's high prices, but is there more to it?
Oh, I think there is. These things, these plans have been in the works for a long time. So in terms of the Tyson deal, first of all, that was a non-harvest facility. So we're talking about processing. And they had increased their efficiencies at other nearby processing facilities. So to make the processing of beef more efficient, they're moving it to other areas. So yeah, you are closing down some of these older plants. So we shouldn't be all that surprised by that. And then the supply piece, I think the Brazil piece talks to that a little bit, as supplies of cattle, not just in North America, but Brazil as well, get smaller. Well, this year, next year, following year, 2025, 26, you are going to see, of course, that shackle space issue show up a little more in terms of there's going to be, fewer cattle. And we've talked also in other calls about increased capacity in other places, new plants coming on. So we've got more capacity overall in the U.S. than we did a year ago. So it's going to be a shackle space discussion, which is in the cattle feeders' favor at this point in time.
I've been traveling a lot the last number of weeks, and everywhere you go, no matter what part of Canadian agriculture you're talking to, a lot of concern about potential tariffs with the U.S. Probably no group more on that front as concerned as maybe people in the beef industry. I'm sure you've been hearing from a lot of people that read your weekly newsletter.
Well, beef and pork, because both in Canada, both of our industries, rely, beef about half, and on the pork side, well, more than half in terms of exports. And our largest and most important market, obviously, is the U.S. So, your piece that you did a week ago on your panel was great, and I would urge everyone to listen to. The four of you went through a lot of the pieces of it really well, but just to reiterate just how important that is, and we know it, the industry knows it, and we'll have to be proactive. But it's hard to know what it means in terms of the threats over the bow versus once we get to January 20th and the work begins.
Yeah, good point. Hey, Ann, thanks so much for joining us here today for the Beef Market Update. All the best. You have a great weekend.
Okay, you too. Thanks, Shaun.
Okay, coming up, we got the RealAg Issues Panel. Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith standing by. First, though, I want to tell you about the next generation of Brandt Utroff augers. They can move up to 9,000 bushels per hour, even in the harshest of conditions. Visit your local Brandt dealer today or go to brandt.ca. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
What's next doesn't happen by accident, doesn't happen by chance.
What's next happens when experience meets expertise, when data meets dollars, and when steel meets earth.
What's next happens when the promising work of Pioneer's state-of-the-art research centers meets the unsparing challenges of more than 17,000 on-farm trials.
Our ultimate goal is to bring the next seed breakthrough to your field.
Because Pioneer isn't just our name.
It's our mission. Pioneer.
What's next
Happens here.
Here's what Wheat Pete's word on RealAgriculture.com is all about in under 30 seconds.
It's wheat time. I love wheat time. I love wheat. Get that sulfur on. Get that seeding rate right. Get that nitrogen on your wheat right. Get that protein. Know your variety. Know when you need to put fungicides on. Pick your product. Pick your rate. Do the right job. Get this wheat crop right. Have a nice day. Grow amazing wheat.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. This segment is brought to you by Blackhawk EVO from New Farm. Blackhawk EVO is the next evolution in pre-seed burn-down herbicides powered by Duplasm technology. Blackhawk EVO delivers fast, flexible, and complete control of early germinating and winter annual broadleaf weeds. You can find out more by going to newfarm.ca. Let's bring in the panel. We got Lyndsey Smith and Kelvin Heppner, both of Real Agriculture. Lyndsey, how are we doing?
We're doing well. It has been a big week, and I'm excited about the panel. We got lots to break down.
Yeah, I think what's going to happen here is we're going to not get to everything, and then for those of you that listen to the RealAg Radio podcast, you're going to get maybe some extra stuff at the back.
Maybe.
I think that's what we're going to do today. We're going to have a bonus segment. We did a bonus segment last week. We did a whole bonus show actually on Friday. We're working overtime around here. Also joining us is Kelvin Heppner, coming out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, how are we doing?
Doing well here, Shaun. We are in the thick of winter here, it feels like, and had a bit of a storm this week. Didn't get to go see Zach Bryan like you did, which would have, I'm sure, been a concert.
It was awesome. It was so good. I am for one glad to see country music has made this turn back to like more like what I would call like 90s country a little bit. Like we've kind of gone back to country. We've left some of the pop a little bit. It's Zach Bryan puts on one heck of a show. I'm glad my wife took me, made me go to it. It was a good time. Very good time. Mm-hmm. We actually asked on yesterday's show, who's your favorite what's the best concert you've ever been to? Jake Legui and I, we need to go to more concerts because we are on the exact same path when it comes to music. So, Jake and I need to do more of that, or maybe do it once, save more of it. Lyndsey, what's the best concert you've ever been to?
Oh goodness, that's a great question. I'm not actually a huge concert person, but I'm trying to think. You know what? Actually, Sarah Harmer, years and years and years ago, played a very small venue in Winnipeg. And it was just one of those, like, it felt like there was only 10 of us in the room, even though it was actually in a hall. But it was just a phenomenal, like, it just felt like it was a bunch of friends sitting around a living room playing music and dancing. And it was great. So yeah, it was good.
Dumb question. Who's Sarah Harmer?
Okay. She's Canadian, Shaun. So, not many people maybe know her. More like like folk. Yeah. Folk music. Okay. Yeah, and she's based in Ontario, and cool. She was probably, I'd say, early 2000s. She was on like radio and stuff like that, but I mean, she still makes music now and that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, it was very like small, but like really great, like just fantastic music.
Kelvin, how about you?
I think I have to say the concert that I actually talked about here on the show a couple months ago when we saw U2 at Sphere in Vegas.
Right.
Top my list.
Yep.
I was very confused when Kelvin sent snaps from that, because that is a very, like, the whole Sphere thing just makes the whole perspective very strange. And I was like, Kelvin, where are you? Because it looked like you're outside, but you're not. And then he explains where he is. I'm like, oh, that makes more sense. It is very strange. Anyway, but super cool.
Okay, Lyndsey, this week you were at Grow Canada in your hometown of Ottawa. What'd you find out? What'd you learn this week at Grow Canada?
Oh, goodness, that's so good. Okay, so I learned that a lot of people don't know I live in Ottawa, or the Ottawa area, so that was fun. You know what? It's anybody's guess. And in fairness, I do have Manitoba phone numbers still, so there is that. And people can be forgiven, I suppose. No, it was, I mean, Grow Canada, it's one probably, Shaun, between the two of us, probably one of our favorite of the season. It changes between Calgary and Ottawa every year. The lineup on Wednesday tackled AI and its applications, which was a really great discussion, and probably the one I enjoyed the most, although Dr. Elliott Grant was really fantastic. He spoke early in the day, but the discussion on VenCap and investing in new technology and just new processes, new things, was really incredibly well done. So a lot of conversation starters, some really interesting discussions, and I will say I took so many notes, which is great, because there were a lot of sort of action items, which I really like. Conferences should offer value for what they do, and so some of it was for for RealAg. There were things that I was like, ooh, this is pretty cool, and then other ones that are definitely for sort of from a personal perspective or just from an idea of what comes next in agriculture kind of perspective. So really well done. Great to see everybody. It was a fabulous conference yet again. So, I was glad to be there, and it did snow the entire time that we were inside. It was our first snowfall of the year for the city. So it took me a very long time to get home, but it was fine. It was worth it.
Yeah. Weston in the Ottawa is a beautiful hotel, and you got the lounge downstairs. It's always a fun conference. I wish I was there.
Yeah.
I'm jealous.
Yeah. You were missed, but everyone said that they liked me more.
Yep.
I might just be throwing that part in.
Totally see that. You're a better hugger.
Yeah, it's true.
I was in London at Agrimart meeting for dealers from Ontario and the Maritimes, which was it was a lot of fun, really good. And I saw lots of RealAg fans, so that was a good time. Got to drive in a brutal snowstorm on Monday night. Don't like lake effect snow.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it's something.
Yeah,
it's
pretty bad.
Not cool. Not cool at all. Also this week, this is kind of the last week of nuttiness, I find. Before there's a few things next week, but this week is always loaded. We had Canola Week, APAS AGM in Saskatchewan. We also have a new president of APAS as well. And the UPA's 100th AGM also happened this week. Kelvin, you were kind of following that a little bit.
Yeah, UPA is Quebec's general farm organization, and I spoke with some people who were at the meeting the last couple of days yesterday, and so I got a bit of an update on it, and we saw some news from the Quebec government this week as well, announcing new restrictions on farmland, who can buy farmland, and I think that was tied in with the UPA meeting, or at least UPA was welcoming that announcement. But 100 years, that's a long time for a general farm organization to be around, and I think that's they certainly celebrated this week, and I think that's worth noting. Certainly, UPA, one of the more powerful, impactful, influential farm groups in Canadian history.
So, what do those new restrictions look like? What are they trying to? They're trying to keep people from outside Quebec. You have to speak French to own farmland, or what's going on?
I don't know the details.
I was being serious, but
for all our American friends, they may not realize there are language laws about signage.
I don't know the details, but a big part of it is to keep investment funds and speculators out of the farmland market. You jump through certain more hoops now to buy land if you're not an active farmer, and so that is the idea. And there are other provinces that have similar rules. It seems like right now, North America wide, there's a lot of discussion right now about who should be allowed to buy farmland.
Yeah, like in Arkansas with that cement facility. There was a Saskatchewan auditor says that regulations need to be better enforced when it comes to some of Saskatchewan's land ownership laws? What's happening?
Yeah, that's related. And Saskatchewan already has some of the, I think you could say, strictest laws in Canada about who can own farmland, that you need to be living in Canada and that type of thing. And so this week, the provincial auditor released a report basically saying that the regulations need changing and need some better enforcement, that they're not convinced that the rules in Saskatchewan are necessarily being followed in a timely manner when it comes to land sales, and that there needs to be more resources put into tracking who's buying land and having that information known earlier in the process.
Lyndsey, whenever we talk about this, like on one hand, I understand policies like this, but on the other hand, I'm like, why do we care so much?
Yeah, it's a hard one because on one hand, depending on the scenario, a fund buying up land around you might increase the value of your own land, potentially. Yeah. Which may be a benefit to you. The flip side, though, is, and I think what often gets sort of talked about is to have, a faceless, nameless kind of neighbor that's a landowner. Are they invested in that community? Are they invested in the long-term health of that land? I think, when I look at what's happening in Quebec, I think that's a lot of what's being brought up, is that we want people who are interested in the long-term growth of the agriculture industry in the local communities, and is an outside investor necessarily that? I think they're sort of pointing the finger that probably not. So, there's definitely scenarios where some farmers do very well by farming land that is owned by, someone in Toronto or someone in whatever, and that is their land base that they work off of. So not to say that it doesn't work well in some scenarios, but I think there's an overarching sort of concern that the further away a landowner is from actual production agriculture, perhaps the less actual long-term care and attention there is to the community as a whole. And I would say that probably, there's probably plenty of examples of that being the case. At the same time, I definitely can see where there are instances where, having money that has come in to buy up some farmland can have spin-off positives as well. So it's a tough one. I think that most people are okay, let's say with someone from the city owning the land, or maybe a province over. I think that most people who feel strongly on the subject, when you start talking about, either, those funds, or worse, offshore, some other country way over there, other countries coming in and buying land, I think most people are like, whoa, that's too far. So there's probably a balance in there somewhere.
Well, we talk a lot about modernizing the industry, and we want to be thought about other industries. This kind of, I think, sort of works backwards to that quest, doesn't it? Like, are we trying to keep some sort of romantic view of the industry by saying who can and who can't own farmland, and how does it apply when other countries apply it to us? Like, the largest agricultural landowner in the U.S. is Canadians,
right? Which do we want to get into friendly politics across our border? I don't think so, because it plays into this as well, right? I think that, as a Canadian, if you're told, did you know that Canadians own a whole bunch of U.S. farmland? We'd be like, yeah, well, same, we're neighbors, whatever. But if you're saying China owns a whole bunch of farmland, I think in the U.S. and Canada, you would have a very different reaction. So again, I think that the players involved does matter. I think that that's pretty clear, and for good reason. I think the flip side, though, is one of the just flat out, they're not making more land, right? And it is the asset that for so many farms, and I spoke with Eric Olson earlier this week talking about the financial position farmers are in now versus, say, the early 80s when we had the run-up in interest rates, et cetera, and trying to navigate difficult situations. One of the key differences in any financial model of the long-term sustainability of a business is whether or not they have equity in a land base, because that is a completely different discussion than if you don't have assets. Land is an asset. It has proven to be an incredibly lucrative one if you are an investor or an owner, and they're not making any more of it. And the land base that we do have needs to be well cared for. And so it gets very complicated very quickly. So I don't know that you can make broad statements about, if we keep certain investors out, does that slow things down? I don't necessarily think so. I think there are good reasons to want only certain certain criteria to be met in order to invest in land.
We also have hybrid models.
If you look at the political environment, this is happening everywhere right now. This is why President-elect Trump is going to block the sale of a U.S. steel company to a company from Japan. It's happening everywhere, and farmland is a critical asset, just like manufacturing base as is viewed in U.S. politics right now.
Yeah. Well, there's also hybrid models too, to that point, where, there is a farmer that, is in a province and they've taken on partnership, and that partnership can be money from Canada, can be from abroad. And, they are, there's a capital advantage that they have because of some of that investment. Should we, because I've heard from some of our audience who think that should be prevented as well. Right. So
there's pros and cons. Yeah. On one hand, so young farmers looking to expand right now, we have aging farm population, record high land prices, and there's a major capital or equity challenge facing the incoming farming generation. How are we ever going to buy our parents out, kind of thing? And so opportunities like that for partnership with investors is one solution there. But at the same time, then you're also competing against. So to me, there's major pros and cons. Like Lyndsey said, it's complicated. If you have investor money coming in, you're competing against it essentially, but at the same time, it might unlock opportunities for buying out mom and dad, kind of thing, or the older generation as they're trying to sell. Because we do have, at least anecdotally, to me, it looks like we have something coming on the horizon here where it's a challenge for the incoming generation to buy out the older generation. And if there aren't tools made available, there's going to be major consolidation. It'll mean the big get bigger and the medium disappear or get smaller.
Yeah, you look at our data from October where we asked about who intends to buy farmland for the 25 season. It's clearly the largest farms that are in the market to buy more land, not medium or smaller farms. Hey, we got to take a break. We got more coming up here on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this. I get to spend every day talking to farmers in the ag industry through RealAgriculture.com and RealAg Radio. But nothing is more fun than speaking to an audience live and in person. If you're planning an ag event, book a Real Agriculture speaker to make it a successful and memorable experience. Email shaney@realagriculture.com and you can book myself or any other Real Ag personality to speak at your event. Bring your audience all the fun, insight, and energy of Real Agriculture.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, the RealAg Issues Panel. Shaun Haney, Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, all of Real Agriculture, here talking about the biggest issues of the week. Hey, farmers, trust is everything. Genesis Fertilizers is making real progress toward providing reliable, locally produced fertilizer. Join the ownership group and protect your bottom line. Learn more at genesisfertilizers.com/credibility. Like it. Okay. Let's continue to dig into the biggest issues of the week. I like when the jobs numbers, Canada and the U.S., come out on the same day, Kelvin. Gives us an opportunity to contrast and compare. I'll tell you what we can compare. Unemployment. That gap between the two countries, it is increasing, my friend.
Yeah, Canada's unemployment rate rose more than expected in November. StatsCan reporting today up to 6.8% unemployment. That's near 8-year high if you don't count the pandemic years in there. At the same time, though, the Canadian, so it was kind of a mixed report, or at least that's what the mainstream media is reporting it as, a mixed report, because unemployment rose, but also the number of net jobs actually rose by 51,000. And so unemployment rose because the number of people in the country, the number of working eligible people increased by 80,000. So we continue to see immigration outstrip the creation of new jobs. It is really troubling, though, that of those 51,000 new jobs created in November, 45,000 of those were in government, in healthcare and education. And so manufacturing jobs actually dropped by almost 30,000 in November, according to these StatsCan numbers. So
why is that,
to me, that's
why is that bad? Why do we need more people in education and more people in healthcare?
We do, yes, but public service jobs are not what pay the bills ultimately. Ultimately, you need an economy underneath it to pay for those public jobs. And if manufacturing is pulling back by 30,000, that's a concerning sign.
Okay. Just quickly, U.S. numbers, compare those. What do we see? The U.S. job number was what, 227,000?
Yeah, that's the number of jobs that were added, which was in line with expectations, up from a gain of 36,000 last month. Unemployment rates rose to 4.2% from 4.1% in November. So a slight tick higher in unemployment in the U.S. as well.
So from the interest rate side of all this, there's an expectation the Fed is going to cut 25 points, but what I'm reading this morning in the Globe and listening on Bloomberg Radio, it sounds like the Bank of Canada, the smart money's betting 50 basis points, Lyndsey, next week.
And I think the numbers are about a 70% chance, which is quite high, of a full 50 basis points, and of course the balance of that to a 25. So 100%, everybody agrees there is a cut, and which is not a surprise. I think, most would say for the next few adjustments, it's anticipated to move down. I guess we see, 50 basis points is possible and in fact potentially probable. However, as Kelvin pointed out, the jobs numbers, not great. We had inflation numbers that weren't as great as we wanted them. So, I don't know that I would say that we've baked in as many rate reductions as perhaps we thought 3 months ago. Definitely some of the indications that the Bank of Canada is watching and does watch have started to move slightly in the other direction from where they were, in which case, so I personally, not that it matters, not an economist, don't care. I'm going with 25 basis points.
You're like Trudeau? You're like Trudeau, you don't care about, you just don't worry about monetary policy?
That's right. The budgets balance themselves. And the bank should worry about the economy, not me, apparently. That is just wisdom out of our prime minister's mouth.
I will say this. There is nothing that gets more cheap laughs from an audience in a speech than budgets balance themselves.
Budgets balance themselves.
It's like, and as a speaker, you're just like, oh, my joke's still funny. It's good.
It's still relevant because we have not the fall economic update that was supposed to come out in November, and we're running out of Fridays here where the federal government can dump that into outside of so it doesn't get a full news cycle, but before the end of the year. But that fall economic update is likely going to show that Canada has blown through all of those guardrails that Chrystia Freeland talked about a year or two ago when it comes to the national fiscal situation, the deficit ballooning again, partly due to this GST holiday and checks that they're going to be sending out here later this winter. And so there's not a good picture on that side of things either. You add in the prospect of tariffs on exports to the US, and I think these interest rate cuts, we're going to continue to see some divergence between the Bank of Canada and the Federal Reserve and our Canadian dollar. Get ready. I think this trend of a lower dollar is only beginning.
Can we talk about the vibes though?
Oh yeah, we're in a vibe session, right?
We're in a vibes.
This is our problem. We're too focused on the vibes. The vibes.
How can you say that, Shaun? We have to focus on the vibes. That's all we have. We don't have a full economic statement. We don't care about our guardrails anymore. We just have vibes. Guys, we're in trouble.
Canadian dollar.
We're in trouble.
Canadian dollar's down almost a full % today.
And you know what? If the U.S. imposes tariffs, what is the Canadian government going to have to do? They're going to have to they're going to politically issue bailouts and support for industries that are affected, and that's going to add to that deficit and add to the worsening debt to GDP ratio.
Well, I'll tell you this: going down to the U.S., buying American beer and bringing it back is getting more and more expensive. That's all I can say.
And cheese, freedom cheese,
tractors.
Freedom cheese. Oh, right, things that matter, parts. Yeah, right.
It's oh boy, like a dollar below. Like I read one report this week where they're talking about like 67 cents on the Canadian dollar.
That's not far away.
So when that would have been 2003, 2004 was the last time we were in that territory, I think. We should double check, but I can remember trying to travel to the States during that time. And not be, when you did the conversion of what lunch cost, you were like, I think I'll just have a snack.
In 2002, we were 62 cents.
Yeah. 20 years ago.
That hurts.
Which is also a bit of a barf. I can't believe it was 20 years ago, 20 some years ago. But it was not a good time, everybody, if you remember it.
No. Okay, so on Kelvin's thread there was an opinion column in the Globe this week by former chief trade negotiator Steve Verhoeven, very concerned about the lack of a cohesive Team Canada dealing with the U.S. He also talked a little bit, I felt he sort of threw some shade in the fact that Canada was much more prepared last time. It kind of gave you the sense that we're not prepared now, which I thought was interesting. And also threw a little bit of shade towards Robert Lighthizer that, saying the Americans were not as prepared as the Canadians in terms of that trade negotiation. I thought it was interesting with us seeing that Robert Lighthizer has been totally frozen out of the new Trump cabinet, at least up until this point. Wow. I'm sure we can expect there's going to be some shifts and maneuvering because there was in the first Trump administration. But Kelvin, what about this idea that Steve Verhoeven has that one of the ways that Canada can maybe snap back at the U.S. if they impose tariffs on the country is to put export tariffs on things like Canadian oil. What do you think when you saw that?
That, I think, would have to be a last resort type measure, and I'm pretty sure Steve Verhoeven did say that, although Bloomberg maybe didn't integrate that into the headline of the story. As a last resort, Canada does have potential leverage there on oil, of course. Agricultural exports to the U.S. is something that where we would also have leverage in terms of imposing an export tax. But think about what that would do to our Canadian economy and domestic prices, Western sentiment politically. That's an extremely, there's a lot of unintended but very well-known consequences that would arise if an export tax was put in place. But that would be one way that Canada could, I guess, have a bit of a punch back against the U.S. on these exports that the U.S. relies on from Canada.
Yeah.
Shaun, do you want to be the person to tell Danielle Smith that, or who's going to tell her?
Alberta will lose its mind.
This is what I'm saying. Like, she would throw hands, I think. Like, seriously.
I don't want to be too hyperbolic about it, but say that's the decision. Say, hey, we're gonna basically energy leaving Canada to go to the U.S. is gonna have a 25% tariff on it. That, okay. I get the reasoning, but it impacts a province for the most part, and that province is Alberta, and that province already has problems with federalism, and I think that creates a whole bunch of different consequences that maybe are worse for the country than the original problem you were trying to fix. Maybe. I don't know. Alberta will not stand lightly quiet on that. Like, that's like an Argentina-like move.
I don't think we should expect this to be like, this is last resort if things are real desperate. That's the only way. And even then, I don't know whether Canada, like you said, it would tear apart the country at a time when Quebec currently, if you look at Quebec provincial politics, separatism is alive and well, and likely next provincial government in Quebec will be a separatist government that is talking about calling a referendum again. You have the Bloc as potentially the opposition party in after a federal election. They're in the running there, and so this country doesn't need more stress on the threads that are holding it together right now.
Mm-hmm. Can we, well, it's probably not a place for this show, but if anybody wants to have that conversation of how is it that we, in our federal government, we could have a party in the official opposition that actually doesn't want to be part of the country?
Canada.
Right? It is just like, the mind wobbles. But to your point, Shaun, and I am sort of, and Kelvin as well, like it's a thought process, right? Like Rahul is laying out like what you could do. And you have to think through what the consequences of those are. And that, yes, that is an option of something we have. But realistically, just like I would argue some of what Trump intends to do with America will have negative consequences, some of them very long. For Canada, that particular move would be absolutely catastrophic. And yes, first and foremost to Alberta immediately. Yes, to federalism as well. But also, let's face it, the rest of Canada gets a chunk of that money. And we need it. So we would also shoot ourselves in the foot in every other province. Just putting it out there.
Last time I checked, Alberta's transfer payment checks, they cash.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
Good point. Hey, we got to take a break. Go ahead. What, Kelvin?
I was going to say quickly, we live in a time where there are politicians all over the place announcing things that don't make sense based on past logic, and yet there's still threatening these types of measures. So the fact that this is in the discussion these days isn't completely a surprise, I guess.
Yeah, good point. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, right after this. If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. We head into the weekend. Looking forward to it. We haven't had any sports talk yet. I know Lyndsey's looking forward to football championship weekend. During the commercial break, she's never quiet about it. I'm like, Lyndsey, we got to talk about agriculture, not football. Stop. But she just keeps on going. It's just, I don't know. It's kind of annoying, everybody. Mm-hmm. Maximize productivity and profitability with an innovative all-in-one approach to farming, combining accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology. MMP Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. Visit mmp.ca to find out more. Lyndsey, who are you picking in the Iowa State Cyclones versus the ASU Sun Devils game?
Well, thank you for telling me who's playing, and I'm going to go with Iowa State.
Cyclone fan you are.
As of right now. Yep. That's what I'm going with. I don't know. I think they've been strong. I think that they have good things about them that are going to result in a win.
Probably lots of listeners that are Cyclone fans here.
I like Iowa. I've been to Des Moines. It's got a great downtown. So anyway, that's what I'm going with. Yeah, okay. Iowa State.
John, did you figure out a wager with Chip Flory?
Mm-hmm.
I did. Yes, of course, I'm a big Sun Devils fan and he's a Cyclone fan. So we've bet supper at Commodity Classic.
Oh, there you go.
I told Chip I have a big appetite, so he better start saving.
I want 3 steaks.
Yeah, exactly.
All in a row. Yeah.
Just
meat.
Yeah.
He'll bring the whole Farm Journal AgriTalk team, I bet. You got to bring your team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I see what Kelvin's doing here. Kelvin wants invited to said dinner.
Well, producer Joe's like, Chip, you can just expense it.
No fair. No. Absolutely not.
I want it on Flory's dime. What are we talking?
That's right. Come on.
I was in an Uber yesterday. My wife and I were in an Uber, and the Uber driver's from Georgia. And I talked about college football with that guy for the 40-minute ride. My wife was like, "Oh, we just can't get away from this.
Mm-hmm.
We just can't get away."
Trish, I feel for you.
Yeah.
This show every week. Okay.
Hey, I saw at Crops Convention coming up in the new year. There's going to be a special guest. One of the speakers is former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, that was pretty cool. I've heard him speak before. He is really fantastic. Actually, I was in the Toronto airport earlier this week, and he was in the lounge. That's Canada right there. Do you think we would ever see a former president in the Delta Lounge in Minneapolis, roaming around and looking for some free salad and maybe a pint of beer? No. But in Canada, no, the former prime minister just walks the halls with the rest of us. That's always kind of cool when you see people like that in person. So anyway, he's going to be speaking, and I think he's doing a fireside chat. Not sure who the moderator is, but let's help the moderator out. What would we like to hear from Stephen Harper? What would be our question we would want to ask him? Kelvin, do you have one?
It's so many different questions. Maybe one thing that comes to mind is something about the end of his term and what advice he would give to the current prime minister in terms of figuring out an exit that has maybe the potential of saving some gracefulness to it. I'm not sure there is still potential for that with the current prime minister, but maybe what advice he'd give to Trudeau personally. That's one thought that comes to mind. But I think in terms of relevance, and especially if we're looking this event, the Crops Convention is in early March, right?
Yep.
So I think Prime Minister Harper has a connection with the Prime Minister of India, Modi, and I would ask Harper for his advice on resolving, while maintaining the rule of law in our country, resolving this ongoing dispute with India and figuring out what he thinks the next steps should be in navigating that important trading relationship.
Yeah, it was interesting. The first thing you brought up there about advice for Prime Minister Trudeau. He spoke at Farm Tech, right? Probably a year after he was defeated by Trudeau, and that question was asked from the audience, and everybody started to laugh. And he gave a very sincere answer, which was the advice I would give the Prime Minister is, dealing with loneliness and finding people you can talk to. And he shared his experience of, I can't remember who the Australian Prime Minister was at the time. Like, there's not a lot of people you can talk to about your problems when you're the Prime Minister and leader of a country, right? It's sort of like you can't call up a high school buddy and say, Bob, you wouldn't believe what's going on here. You just can't do that.
Especially when you're 9 years in and you've alienated a lot of the people that were your friends earlier, and you've closed your inner circle in real tight. That's got to be real lonely. And this is from a personal perspective, not we're not talking about political record here, but just from a personal perspective, like you said, this has got to be the most lonely of times to be when you're at the end of your term. And Harper kind of went through that before that final election where the Conservatives lost to Trudeau.
Absolutely.
And I think,
Lyndsey,
so amazing, really good ideas there, Kelvin, because, and similar, but different. I have sort of two. One would be, sort of his thoughts on Canada's place in the world right now, on, his thoughts anyway about, what the last 9 years, what we've been through as everyone, but also as Canada, and thinking about coming up against, a Trump administration for the next 4 years and how much just unknown there is right now. So thinking, in March, I would like to know where he sees Canada's place in the world as far as what we do, what we don't do, where we play, where we don't. I think that's an important one. And further to that, I think is what does it mean to be Canadian? I think this is a question we grapple with a lot. Rick Mercer's latest book, that was out a couple of years ago, is he sort of tries to answer that question of what does it mean to be Canadian? And I think Harper is an incredibly proud Canadian. I think that, I think he would have some really neat thoughts on where we're at now, or where he thinks, perhaps we've gone astray. But I think all of us, I think about, specifically the last little while, and I think about most recently, the federal government just seeming to now overcorrect on this immigration file because they went so far into letting, all these people in. Now we're going to turn around and stop everybody from coming in. And it feels like, and then we're dealing with our neighbors and our largest trading partner, and that relationship is really volatile. And I feel like, a little lost at times as to what are we known for? What do we stand for? What do we really, show to the world? And I think that I would love to hear what his thoughts are on it, because I think they would be incredibly insightful.
I think his thoughts would come with real gravitas. Like they would, like,
yeah, I think so too.
You guys are really good. You guys should do interviews for a living.
Well, you know what? I've thought about it, Shaun. I was also thinking that maybe you should be the fireside chat host.
No,
Can we plan that? No, you're busy.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think I'm not sure who's going to do it, but I think it's it's awesome they've got him there. Like,
I think so too.
I think it's the time where we need to hear from former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. At times like this, as Canada's really at a real crossroads with our major trading partner. Kelvin mentioned India. Of course, how do you handle China? Like, there's a lot of things to balance in the foreign affairs file. And foreign affairs issues don't win you an election. But as an exporting nation, we've got stuff to figure out here. Welcome to the bonus component here of the RealAg Radio podcast. We're having so much. We didn't get to all the topics, and we knew that was going to happen because the team floods in all these topics, and there's just too many. And we have lots to say here. One of the things we didn't get to on the show on Sirius XM today was this question of who would be better to deal with the Trump administration, Prime Minister Trudeau or Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. And Abacus Data actually asked this question, and it's pretty clear, from a people perspective, who Canadians feel would be better suited to do this. So when asked the question, which leader would Trump prefer to work with as prime minister, 59% of Canadians said Pierre Poilievre. Even 45% of Liberals said Pierre Poilievre. Like, talk about writing on the wall for Prime Minister Trudeau. Lyndsey, how do we interpret this from your perspective?
Well, I guess, are there surprises in this? If you've been following along with what Abacus Data has been polling for the last little while, probably not. And so David Coletto he and his team have been asking several of these questions, and ultimately the message of just driving home that Trudeau is so done just keeps coming up, no matter which question they seem to ask or how they seem to phrase it. Even, people who voted for Trudeau, those who are card-carrying Liberals, those who plan to or would vote Liberal in the next election will still tell you so long as it's not Trudeau. So, there's a portion of that population too. So, are we surprised at the outcome or the opinion? Absolutely not. Now, I think that there's probably more nuance to it than that. I think that I don't know. Because it's not entirely asked, although I think there is a follow-up question about, getting a good deal for Canada. I personally, I'm trying to think of not what I think of Poilievre or what I think of Trudeau. I'm trying to think of the people that they are, the way they do things, the policies that they believe in, etc. When sitting down across from Trump, how that would play out is a big question. I think, Trudeau going down to Mar-a-Lago and having dinner with Trump, I think actually went over really well as far as within the inner circles of that. I think that Trudeau probably fits into that circle a lot easier, more naturally than a Pierre Poilievre, right? He is a career politician. He's he speaks in these, which maybe is the same as Trump. He speaks in these alliterations constantly, and these speaking points. To me, it's more I don't actually see the two of them having a lot in common, or the things that they do have in common, they're just going to butt heads over. So as much as I'm not saying that, Trudeau needs to stay in power. He's not going to. It doesn't matter anyway. But this idea somehow that Poilievre is going to be the slam dunk on dealing with Trump, I just don't necessarily agree. So my take on all this is that the numbers reflect what people think of Trudeau, not necessarily a huge endorsement of Poilievre.
So there's a couple other questions here. So which leader has the best chance of achieving a positive outcome for Canada with Trump? 45% of Canadians saying Poilievre, 20% saying Trudeau. Again, where is it here? Current Liberals, 12% said Poilievre, and 66% of them said Trudeau. So, Kelvin, the numbers, either question, the numbers show that Canadians believe, rightly or wrongly, there's a perception here that Pierre Poilievre is the one to carry the flag for Canada when it comes to any sort of trade negotiation.
Yeah, and some of this I think goes back to broader, maybe not so much personality. Lyndsey touched on some of the personality differences, and I agree that Trudeau his main benefit or advantage is that he floats in that Mar-a-Lago crowd a lot easier than I think a Poilievre would. It would be more awkward for Poilievre. Yeah. Poilievre in a J. Vance crowd, I think, would get along well. They're more cut out of the same cloth, but I'm not sure Poilievre and Trump, the personal relationship would be as I think Trudeau and Trump actually. I think Trump actually enjoys hosting Trudeau and spending time with Trudeau. I think though the broader issue here is that Trudeau's support is so low that he doesn't have a united front here when it comes to Canada's negotiations. And so I think that's why people are picking Poilievre here and Conservatives, because there is so much support for them, or at least that's what the polls are showing. And if we had a federal election that the Conservatives want a majority in, I think Canada's negotiating team and the provinces would have to pull in behind Poilievre and the federal government, whereas right now we're seeing provinces go at it on their own. In many cases, it's not as much of a united front. I think in terms of personalities, Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, we've talked about this the last few weeks. I think having him as the point person for Canada may actually be an advantage for that personal relationship with Donald Trump, because Ford and Trump do politics the same way. They speak the same way. They engage with voters in the same way, I would say. And so I think that's where there's more of a personality fit. I think these polls showing Poilievre as having the best chance, it's more about the Conservative Party and having that mandate where voters have said, we want you in charge. We want this party calling the shots. Right now, the Liberals have lost that. And so I think that's why people are frustrated.
Yeah, you bring
or
up
not.
because I think of Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta. I think she's almost like a little bit more JD Vance circle than with Trump too, right? So it could be interesting the role because you think about in the first NAFTA renegotiation, Mike Pence, vice president, played a bit of a role, but I wouldn't say that he was a targeted, person for Canada. That may change in this round, where maybe Canada working really hard on former Iowa Senator JD Vance and working that angle more so than we did the last time.
Ohio, right?
Yeah.
Well, Lyndsey?
Well, I was going to say, if I may, statistically speaking, he may end up president. So, only because Trump is 78 years old. He will be 82. Men don't live as long as women. The average age is, mid 70s. So I'm just saying Vance could end up president, statistically speaking. So maybe that's not a bad thing. Let's have all our politicians meet with all their politicians and keep all our options open.
I said Iowa Senator. I meant Ohio.
Ohio. There's so much the same.
I misspoke. And I think if you look at which leader would Trump prefer to work with as prime minister, the 23% of Canadians saying don't know, and the 26% of Canadians, when asked which leader would get the best outcome, 26% said don't know. I think that might be where the smart money is, to be honest, because I have speculation or I have thoughts. I can argue, like I've said to audience and speeches, I can argue both sides of this, how Trudeau would be better, and I can argue how Poilievre would be better. I think at the end of the day, getting a positive outcome is a super big challenge. And I think the challenge is bigger this time than it was the last time in reality. So I think the 26% that are saying don't know, they might be the ones that are choosing the right selection there. And what really speaks poorly of Trudeau before we wrap up is the question was, which party is best able to handle the issue? And there's a number of different issues here. And there's a lot of blue on the screen for the Conservatives, except for one. And the one where people think the Liberal Party is better to deal with the issue, 31% of Canadians saying Donald Trump and his administration. So although people think that Poilievre is a much better choice to deal with Trump, they don't think that for the Conservative Party. They think it for the Liberals. So, Kelvin, this is very damning for the Prime Minister.
Yeah, this is a tough one because to me, in some ways, this is conflicting data here versus what we've just been talking about for the last 10 minutes. But I think that, this shows that the party has a better brand than the Prime Minister right now. And that's something that I think, like Lyndsey said, it just seems like everywhere you look right now, Trudeau has no chance of coming back and that he's toast. And this is showing that the party has a better rating here than what the Prime Minister does.
Why would you want to go down with the ship like this?
It's a very loaded question. And having never been Prime Minister, I don't know that I can answer.
Is that what it is, though? It's like you're the Prime Minister. Like, you just don't leave that job unless people tell you got to leave it? Is that maybe that's why. Yeah. There's just an opportunity to take an exit ramp here. To take the off ramp, and it's a very interesting question, I think. And I'm not saying it flippantly. I'm being serious, trying to get into the mind here to understand the why. Because
that off ramp though, I think that was back in fall when there was actually some talk about that. It's all gone quiet now. There's no talk about anybody pushing the Prime Minister out from inside the party or inside caucus, and so it's hang on as long as we can is sure what it looks. It's looking like that's the scenario facing, and that's why we have this GST holiday on our Christmas trees. If you want to buy December 17th or whatever it is,
that's a wreck. What a wreck that is! Canadian Federation of Independent Business has done a great job of showcasing the challenges and the burden that this administration of this has put on small business. Woo.
Well, and
that the burden to the federal coffers too. Now they're talking $8 billion cost to this addition to the deficit. So we're taking the deficit from 40 or 42 to 47, 40, 50, somewhere in that range, just to stay in power for a few more months, kind of thing is what it looks like. But
that doesn't matter, Kelvin, at this point, right? I mean, what's What's another few billion? And I'm being completely facetious because it does matter. But it is a disaster. And it's one of those that it's not like we didn't see this coming. We have an incredibly complicated tax code in Canada. Doing something like removing GST from certain items and not others just creates an absolute headache. It's only for 60 days. Like, what on earth are we doing here, people? Like, come on. It shouldn't even, so I'm just ticked it even went forward, because honestly, I don't think it should have, because it is so incredibly silly and such an incredible waste of money and time. And honestly, the actual impact on the everyday Canadian's wallet is going to be dollars.
It's so minimal.
That's it. It's minimal. And sure, there's lots of people who be like, yep, great, I saved some dollars. I get that, cool, but it's not going to help you make a rent payment if that's the struggle right now. It's not going to help you find a house, or it's not really going to help you afford new snow pants for your kid. Like, a few dollars per household really doesn't change diddly squat. So it's stupid.
Somebody shared with me, the Prime Minister this morning was talking about, maybe it was yesterday, that he's going to crack down on Verbo rentals.
Okay. Yeah.
To create more.
Yeah, he was tweeting Airbnb and Verbo this week, saying that all those buildings, houses should be opened up to the housing market. That would help the housing supply.
But what are we cracking down on?
Yeah.
Like
the short-term rentals, getting rid of them.
So you can't have a passive. So we're trying to eliminate passive income. People having an asset
that's right.
they paid for. It's passive income because they're renting it out. Like, really?
Yeah. And so are we just one step away from let's just seize people's assets? Right? Like, it just
only own one.
Yeah.
This is full circle to our farmland discussion at the beginning.
Exactly.
Of
who should be able to. Yeah.
Housing, is it just the people who live in it? That's kind of what the Prime Minister was implying.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We have solved all the problems. So moving on. Anyway.
We're at number 5 out of the 20 things on our list of things to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. We did well.
We have a lot. We got a lot to do. Fridays are busy around here.
They really are. Yeah.
Awesome
but
stuff. Everybody, please. I always say, provide feedback. Continue to provide your feedback. We love to hear from you in terms of what your thoughts are and your opinions on some of the things that we talked about. Like, sometimes Lyndsey says some stuff that I question as well. I want to hear from you. Haney at RealAgriculture.com. I'm just having some fun. Everybody have yourself a great weekend. Cheers, everybody.